Hey guys, it's Alyssa from AlyssaNalani.com. Welcome back to my channel. As you saw from the title of the video, today I'm going to be introducing the Book of James, which is the book that we're going through for Club 119 Season 2. Now, our actual scripture plan does not begin until next week, September the 27th, but this week I wanted to make sure that we were taking time to get ready and to get geared up for the season. So in the past couple of videos, I've talked about what you can expect from Season 2, how it's going to be a little bit different from Season 1 when we were going through the 119th Psalm, and I also took the time to put together my journal for the season. I'm going to be using a traveler's notebook system this time. And so I showed how I'm going to be using this and what inserts I have inside. So if you haven't checked out either of those videos, I definitely encourage you to do so. The links for both of them are in the description. In this video, I wanted to talk about the Book of James itself, how it is constructed, the things that you want to look out for and pay attention to as you're reading and studying, and also how I'm going to be approaching this book as a Bible study. But first, before I talk about the Book of James itself, I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about Bible translations and a couple of resources that you might want to use. Now, when it comes to Bible translations, there are a couple of things that you want to consider. When I was doing the prep work for this series, I was using two translations primarily, the English Standard Version and the New King James Version. Now, there is an entire spectrum of Bible translations, and that spectrum is generally divided up into three different categories: word-for-word translations, thought-for-thought translations, and paraphrases. And when it comes to a conversation about Bible study, this matters. This past summer, as a part of my Bible study project series, I did a video where I was talking about the difference between Bible study and devotional reading. Now, these are both very profitable activities when it comes to engaging in the Word, but they are very different. And when it comes to Bible study, your best choice is going to be a word-for-word translation. And that's simply because a word-for-word translation is going to be closer to the original text, the original language that the Bible was written in way back when, than a thought-for-thought or a paraphrase. And that's important when you're studying the Bible. Now, both the English Standard Version and the New King James fall into that word-for-word translation category, along with the much-beloved King James Version and the New American Standard Bible. Now, the topic and conversation of Bible translations can be a very heavy one. It can also get rather complex, and it can get really personal for a lot of people. But it is pretty important, and I actually do plan on doing a video for the Bible study project where I talk about some of the things that you should consider when choosing a Bible translation. But for the purposes of this video and this series for Club 119, my general recommendation is, when choosing a translation, just consider going for a word-for-word translation. First is one of my favorite books when it comes to talking about Bible study, and that is Women of the Word by Jen Wilkin. And I'm so sorry, it is too bright for you to see this very well. The glare is for real, but this is the first edition. The second edition actually just got released not too long ago, so if you're gonna buy it, see if you can get your hands on the second edition. This is a fantastic book when it comes to building your own personal Bible study method and practice. She talks about very practical ways to, well, the subtitle says it all, how to study the Bible with both your hearts and your minds. She really challenges you to think about what you're studying, not to let your feelings have improper emphasis in how you're studying the Bible, and also to approach Bible study as a savings account that you're putting into every single time you're engaging with the Word. You may not get up from your quiet time or your Bible study time or whatever you call it. You may not get up from that experience feeling like you had your morning motivational pep talk. You might get up from your study and grapple with what you just read and still have questions about what just happened in the text. And that's okay. And that's actually good. That means you're thinking about it. You are questioning. You are forming conclusions. And that is all a part of study. And Bible study is a skill, you guys. It's not something that we just become good at just because we're Christians. It's a skill. It has to develop, and it takes time. So if you've never read this book, I highly, highly recommend it. A lot of my approach to Bible study comes from what she says in this book. So if you've read it, you might hear echoes of of Jen Wilkin in my comments, because I just think that her approach is very practical, very attainable, and very important. And a second resource that I wanted to share is for the book of James specifically. And it comes from the Bible Project. Not the Bible Study Project, which is my series here on YouTube, but the Bible Project, which is a website. It is, I believe, a podcast, and they also have a really great YouTube channel. And one of the things that they do that I really love is they have a playlist, one for the Old Testament and one for the New Testament. So that's two playlists. They have two playlists, two series, one for the Old, one for the New Testaments. And they go through each book of the Bible and explain what each book is about. They give a general overview of what the stories are, what the themes are, basically give a roadmap through the chapters and explain what the book is about and what you can expect and how it fits in the biblical narrative as a whole. And it's super cool. The video production is so on point, and they're just well done. And along with the videos, they have these printable posters. Let's see if I can get that so that you can see it better. Here we go. They have these printable posters. They're absolutely free on their site. And this, like you can see, it's for the book of James. And it goes through the themes of the 5 chapters in the book. And so what I did with this is I cut it down. This is the first dashboard in my journal. On the inside of my first dashboard, I cut it down and just taped it in like a tip-in. I tipped it in so that it is here in my first dashboard, and I have it for reference. And so it's a really cool resource. I love their channel. I don't agree with all of their commentary. Some of the conclusions that they draw, I personally don't agree with everything they say, but they have really great information when it comes to kind of understanding how the different books are written and where they fit into the story, because the Bible is one great big story, and sometimes we forget that we know, I think, at an intellectual level, that the whole Bible is important. Some people believe that some parts are more important than others. Some people believe that, like, the Old Testament isn't important at all. We just need the New Testament. So wherever you fall into that, we know at an intellectual level that the Bible is important, but we may not understand that the Bible in its entirety is a story that builds on itself, where each part of the Bible is a piece of the puzzle, and we need all of it to tell this bigger story of God and how he is dealing with sin and how he is loving and merciful, but he's also just and he is particular. And so anyway, I'm kind of rambling and I don't mean to, but I really love the way that they present each book, and it's a really great tool to use when you are wanting to know, like, some overview information. So anyway, I love the poster. I will have it linked below. Let's talk about the book of James. Now, when approaching a passage of scripture, in this case, an entire book, there are some questions that you need to answer. And in the book, Women of the Word, she asks, or she says that we need to ask 5 questions. And I'm pulling this straight from the book on page 64. She says, we need to know who wrote it, when it was written, to whom was it written, in what style was it written, and why it was written. All right, I'm going to warn you, I did not script any of this. I'm going to try to do this from memory, because I think I've spent enough time prepping that I should be able to answer all 5 of these questions without looking. All right, to answer the first question, who wrote the book, we get the answer from the title of the book, which is James. James wrote the book of James. Now, that's not always the case. When we take a look at 1st and 2nd Timothy, they're not written by Timothy, they're written by Paul to Timothy, right? So the name of the book is not always indicative of the author, but in this case it is. James wrote the book of James, and the James who wrote the book of James would have been the half-brother of Jesus. Now, this could mean one of 2 different things. Either James was the older half-brother of Jesus, meaning he would have come out of a previous marriage of Joseph's. We know that Joseph was a bit older than Mary. Mary was really young when she had Jesus. And so he could have been an older half-brother from a previous marriage, or he could have been a younger half-brother, being a son of both Mary and Joseph after Jesus was born. From what I've studied, I think that James is the older half-brother of Jesus. And one of the reasons why I think that is because after Jesus ascended back into heaven and the early church was being started, James was looked at as a leader in the church. And when you think about the fact that Jesus was young when he died, he was only 33, the disciples were young at the time, these were young guys at the time, for James to be a leader or more of a patriarchal person in the church, it would have made sense that he would have been older. This is just from what I've read and what I've studied. You might come to a different conclusion, but generally it is accepted that at least James was the half-brother of Jesus. The second question is, when was it written? Now, the book of James is located towards the end of the New Testament, but it was actually written very early in the history of the Christian church. It's actually believed to be one of the first, if not the first book written in the New Testament. And they determined that based on different dates and events of the early church, including the stoning of Stephen, when James himself actually died, and the age of the church at the time that the letter was written, based on how he addresses his audience, which we'll get to in just a second. And the third question is, to whom was it written? And we find this out in the opening line of the book. He says that he is writing to the church after the dispersion. And what that means is that the church at the time was being persecuted and they dispersed throughout the country. They went into different parts of the country in order to escape the persecution, and he is writing to those people who have dispersed. Now, what's also important to understand is this is before the gospel was taken to the Gentiles. So he would have been speaking to Jewish Christians, people who were still very much familiar with Jewish customs and practices and worldview and just a way of living. So the people that he is addressing at the time are a very specific kind of people. They come with a very specific context into this new faith in Jesus, into this new church called Christianity. However, at the same time, because of the way the book is written, it also is just a general letter to the church. He addresses concepts and themes and issues that are relevant for every believer. So while his original audience were a very specific group of people, it transcends even that audience to all who believe in Jesus and want to be followers of him. Fourth question is, in what style was it written? Now, James is a very practical book, and it echoes the style of the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, which would be Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. It is also a letter, so it is like an essay or an address to a group of people, which differ from other styles of biblical literature, which include things like poetry, history, and prophecy. Last but not least, the fifth question is, why was this book written? Now, like I said, the book of James is a very practical book, but it addresses topics and issues that would have been extremely important and relevant to the church at the time. Remember, the church was really young at the time. It was in its infancy, and it was also being persecuted. And there were a lot of different things going on as far as the gospel going out to all the world as Jesus had commanded them in the Great Commission. They were discussing and debating and developing doctrine, and in their everyday life, they had to deal with the real challenges of poverty and persecution. So James writes this letter to a very early church, telling them that they need to cultivate an active, vibrant faith in Jesus. Not just a faith that simply does lip service, but a faith that takes action, a faith that determines how we treat others, a faith that echoes what Jesus taught when he was here on earth, even a faith that echoes what was taught to their forefathers back in the Old Testament, a faith that doesn't just sit around and do nothing, but a faith that works, a faith that provides the lenses on how they see the world and interact with the world that they live in, a faith that cultivates patience and endurance during the hard times, and a faith that produces peace and joy gentleness, and love no matter what's going on around you. He writes this very practical letter that shows how a Christian ought to live their lives if they truly want to be followers of Christ. Okay, so that was an introduction to the book of James in a nutshell. And I really do mean in a nutshell, because there are so many other things that we can consider and know about this book. But I just wanted to give you a brief overview. I wanted to ask some of those really important questions as we are approaching this text, and just give you a little bit of context as we are getting into the series. And before we wrap up this video, I want to talk about how I'm going to be approaching this series and doing the study, and some of the things that you can use or pay attention to as you are going through it as well. All right, so I mentioned it in my last two videos, but it bears mentioning in this one, and that is the study and application journal that I put together for this series. It has two different kinds of questions: study questions that make us think about what the text is saying. It also has applications that make us think about how this applies to our lives personally. It also has a couple of other features that I want to talk about. A couple of things that are important when studying the Bible are paying attention to themes and vocabulary words. I think I talked about this in my updated Bible study bullet journal video. When I'm going through reading the Bible, I like to pull out vocabulary words and look up the definitions in the dictionary. So what are the basic definitions of these words, as well as what did it mean in the original text, which is information that you can get from a concordance. Obviously, the Bible wasn't written in English, so what did it say in the original Hebrew or Greek or Aramaic? So these are things that you can write down in your journal if you have it. Even if you don't have it, you can write it in your journal or your notebook or whatever. You can write down words that pop out at you that you want to further define so that you can understand the context. I know I'm holding this up and you can't even see what's on the page. I'm sorry. That's totally pointless. Anyway, so vocabulary words are words that you want to look out for. You're going to come across words like, I believe justification's in there, judgments in there, partiality is in there, words like that, words that you really want to make sure that you understand in the context of what James is talking about so that you can fully understand the idea or the issue that is being addressed. The other thing that you're going to want to pay attention to is themes. And one of the things that I really like about this poster, I'm trying to show this so you can see it. Yeah, okay, lighting's not gonna work with me. Anyway, this poster really does a good job about explaining the themes within the chapters. So chapter 1 is like an introduction to the book, which is fitting, right? And he talks about the themes that he is about to address, and then he addresses those themes and topics throughout chapters 2 through 5. And so the way that this poster is constructed is they go through those different themes as they are addressed in the different chapters. And so I'm going to be using that, like I showed you in my journal. I have it in my journal so that I can use that kind of as a reference point as I'm constructing my own study notes. You may have a different approach to constructing your notes. I didn't really pay attention to themes hugely in, sorry, I'm holding up the wrong piece of paper. I don't even have to be holding up a piece of paper, but I didn't really address, I'm just gonna go with it. We're gonna keep all of this in there. I'm not gonna edit it out. I didn't really address themes too much, if at all. I really can't remember in the journal, because I want you to put that together for yourself. I want you to ask questions. Oh, that was the other thing. There's a space in here in the journal where it has a place for you to ask your own questions. I ask a lot of questions in the journal, but I want you to ask questions as well. I'm not here necessarily to teach you specific things. I'm here to be the sister who's sitting alongside you or across the table from you, who's also studying this stuff just like you are. I don't have enough answers to give you. So I'm going to be answering these questions along with you. I'm going to be asking more questions, I'm sure, just like you should be doing as well. So that's how I'm going to be approaching it. That was kind of rambly. I hope that was understandable. But that's how I'm going to be approaching it. That's how I'm going to be doing my study. And as I share in each weekly video, I'm just going to challenge you to sit with a text and to consider the text and to consider what's being said and what that means for you and how you live your life. You can't read a practical book like James and walk away the same person that you were when you started it. You just can't and call yourself a Bible believing Christian. And that sounds like a really harsh statement, but to be honest, when you read the Bible, any part of the Bible, it should convict us. It's supposed to change us. That's what being a Christian is all about. We're not supposed to remain the same person throughout our life's journey. We're supposed to grow and mature and be nurtured and challenged and convicted by the word and by the people around us so that our characters can be refined and more closely resemble that of Jesus. I think I've addressed everything that I wanted to address in this video. So I'm literally looking at all my stuff and making sure that I didn't leave anything out, because the problem is I could start rambling again like I just did, and this video could be another 5 minutes long unnecessarily. Give me a second. So in the interest of not rambling off into some other tangent, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to drop them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them as soon as I can. Also, if you've been gearing up for the series and there's something specific that you're looking forward to, drop those in the comments as well. Let me know what you're looking forward to reading about or studying or discussing. I'd like to know what you are looking forward to for this series. As always, I hope you guys are having a great day. I will talk to you in the next video, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.